The Megaknight is one of those cards that has really gone up and back down throughout the different patches. On release, he was okay. He was decent. I think he got buffed a little bit. He became really strong for a little while, especially in that like Zap Bait deck with Skeleton Barrel and Inferno Dragon that was really popular for a while. But he's one of those cards that just has the potential to do really well with his area of effect damage, his massive health pool, and his Enter the Arena effect. I think that right now he's at a pretty good spot because he's in some decks, but he's not all over the place and super OP. So tonight we're going to be taking a look at this Megaknight Ram Rider deck. Now this first matchup is against a Mortar Bait deck, if I'm not mistaken. It's not exactly the perfect classic version of it. I think the Dark Goblin is not normally run in there, but it's definitely a variation of it, the Mortar Rascals Bait kind of deck. So this deck here, first of all, you'll notice half the cards are legendary. So it's not a very F2P free-to-play friendly deck. It's not a very ladder friendly deck. It's more of a challenge deck, you know, classic or grand challenge, unless you're one of those players that definitely has all your cards to high level and you're, you know, willing to play it on ladder, then go right ahead. It kind of is a bit of a control deck. You've got a lot of defensive cards and then a little bit of counter push potentially. You don't have a battle ram, but you do have the Ram Rider in there, and you've got that Bandit in there, so that gives you a slight element of bridge spam and aggression, but you're going to be playing it more of like a control deck, using those cards to counter push. Now, as you've heard me mention in other videos with the Ram Rider, she has huge defensive potential, and it's not the first thing that you would think of when thinking of a card like the Ram Rider, because she's more of a win condition. She's something that runs straight for the tower and connects to it. But there you can see, that's just a minor example. She provided a little bit of extra DPS for that minor, a minor example on the minor, but it's more that snare effect. She can completely lock things down, hold them in place, and that can be huge on defense. If you've got like a hog coming down, or a balloon coming down your lane, or a battle ram, she will literally hold that thing right in place, and her with the Princess Tower, if it's alone, will just completely take it out. Like, that balloon is as good as gone if it's sent in by itself and it doesn't have any support, and you got the Ram Rider plus the Princess Tower doing work on it. That thing is dead. Same thing with the Hog Rider, same thing with another Ram Rider. She'll hold it in place, and her plus the Princess Tower will take it out before your Ram Rider will be taken out. So you generally are going to be using her on defense and then going in for a counter push with her. She's your major and main, if not only, win condition in this deck. So don't necessarily be, you know, too frugal with her. Like, you'll notice I used her there on offense, and I was actually able to connect to the tower, and it was just a good opportunity. I had a lot of elixir. I was able to put down the poison because I knew he was going to have a Rascals or Goblin Gang or something to try to counter that Ram Rider. It works out really well. So just, you know, keep her in mind as more of a defensive counter push card, but then of course you need to use her from time to time to connect to the tower, because you don't have much else that is going to be able to connect to the tower, unless of course you just get a massive push behind like your Megaknight or something, right? You've got a lot of other defensive cards in this deck for sure as well. Let's talk about that Megaknight himself. I mean, he's one of those cards that you'll notice in one or two replays I do cycle him in the back once or twice in double elixir time, but almost never will I do something like that. I'm almost always going to be using him on defense, because he's going to go in and he's going to do that Enter the Arena effect. I wonder why my opponent didn't just fireball my tower there, but anyway, we were able to pull a win there with 1 HP. He's got that Enter the Arena effect, he's got that splash damage, he just does some serious defense, and then he's super tanky, so provides a lot of threat on offense as well. Alright guys, this is going up against a Hog Freeze deck. It looks like a similar, you know, variation of the 2.6 Hog deck, but it's got a Freeze in it. Freeze is one of those cards that was really strong for a while. It was decent in its old version, and then when they switched it and, you know, kind of changed it up and made it have a new utility and do damage and freeze for 5 seconds straight, regardless of level, like, that was pretty insane. It was all over the place. It's not nearly as strong now because of the damage nerf and the duration nerf, but you'll still see it here and there from time to time. Not so much, but occasionally you will. It doesn't prove to be too much of a problem in this deck. I've got a lot of defensive cards, so I generally am able to handle it pretty well, but just something to keep in mind. See, you'll notice there he used it, and then I go ahead and put down my Bandit. Poor placement of the Bandit there. Oh man, looking back at that, that was just terrible. Should have put it a little bit further away so it got the dash. Should have put it down sooner. But again, guys, as I always say, hindsight's 20/20. You know, looking back at it, that's why we watch our replays, is to catch all these mistakes. So you got more defensive cards in this deck. You've got the Bandit, as I mentioned. You can use her on defense. She can be used aggressively with the Ram Rider at the bridge, but she's also a great defensive card. If they've got any sort of support coming down the lane, you can use her to counter that really well. You know, she'll charge at a Sparky and hit the Sparky before the Sparky gets its shot off. She'll charge at a Prince or a Dark Prince and won't take any damage from their initial charge. Pretty great defensive card. And then she's super speedy and has that charge effect, so she can connect to the tower or whatever your opponent's support is on defense before they even notice. So another defensive counter push card in this deck for sure. Very much looking like a control deck the more I break it down and talk about it, right? Then you got the Inferno Dragon. Inferno Dragon is another defensive card. You don't really use it like at the bridge aggressively. It's not a very speedy card. It takes a long time to get there. It locks onto the tower and charges up over a long time. So it's not an aggressive card, it's more of a defensive card, and that's your main answer to countering heavy tanks. Obviously it is, you know, that goes without saying, but if you aren't too familiar with the Inferno Dragon or Inferno Tower, they are just go-to counters for anything heavy, like a P.E.K.K.A, a Golem, a Lava Hound, a Megaknight, so on and so forth. You know, the Inferno Dragon only costs 4 Elixir, and it actually does really well against medium units as well, so if you see like a Baby Dragon coming by itself, Inferno Dragon will shut it down no problem. Even like a Musketeer, I could even use it on like the Hog Rider here by itself. Not the best, most ideal counter for a Hog Rider, but it does good DPS, so it has the potential to do that. And then, of course, just like with most other cards in this deck, if it survives on defense, it provides a lot of threat on offense. Because let's say that they do make the mistake of allowing it to connect to their tower, then their tower just gets melted. If they don't answer it, they don't zap it, they don't counter it, you know, they don't interrupt it with a fireball or a zap, or they don't destroy it before it charges up. A few seconds into that charge up, that tower will all of a sudden start taking like 500 damage a second, and then all of a sudden it'll be melted and just be completely gone. I use the poison there, you'll notice, on the King Tower as well, because I know I'm going to be taking out the Princess Tower, and we're going to be moving on into overtime here, so I want to get a little bit of damage on the King Tower as well if possible. And you can see here, I'm going in aggressive. The Megaknight lived and connected to the tower, so I go in for the counter push with the Ram Rider. I go in with the Bandit as well. Bandit connects to that tower, gets the charge off, and gets an extra auto attack off. Does some serious damage. So that's mostly it for the legendary cards. Megaknight, as I mentioned, you know, he enters the arena, he does some serious splash damage. He can also be used to knock down or knock back things, so he can counter things like hogs, like I just did there. Doesn't attack air, so he's useless against the balloons. You'll be relying on like your Ram Rider, your minions, or your Inferno Dragon for that. But as far as like any sort of splash damage or a swarm unit goes, he'll counter it with his splash damage. So if they've got a Skarmy coming down or a Goblin Gang, or even if they've got like a Wizard and a Witch or something like that, you know, kind of stacked up, then you can use him on top of them. He'll enter the arena, he'll blow them up in a second, and then if he doesn't finish them off with the enter the arena effect, then his auto attacks definitely will. Alright guys, this is going up against a Golem deck here, and this is an interesting variation of the Golem deck. This one has been pretty popular lately, actually. Maybe I should cover this one as well. It's got the Hunter in it, it's got the Prince in it. It doesn't have your classic, you know, Night Witch, Lumberjack, Baby Dragon, Tornado, or Wizard Tornado, or whatever. So it's a little bit different, and I want to try it out. I've just been playing Golem a lot on ladder, and I have my, you know, particular ladder variation of it based on my card levels. Here's the Bandit on defense, by the way, charging in and absorbing that Prince's charge. You know, so maybe I'll try this one in the future. I just haven't been too interested in trying another Golem deck, given that I'm playing it a lot on ladder. Alright, let's talk about the other two cards, the other two troop cards in this deck, the non-legendaries, and then we will talk about the spells as well. So you got the minions. They're just good in the theme of a bridge spam kind of style deck. You know, they're just a good card all around, kind of like archers. Like, they survive through zap. You know, the archers don't die to log, for example, or zap. Minions survive through zap. They provide really good DPS. They're a little bit speedy, but not too speedy. So they're just a great card all around, and they fit very well into this deck. They're another air attacking unit, so they're great for countering like balloons and lava hounds and things like that. So you have the Inferno Dragon and the minions, which are both pretty high DPS air units that also attack air. So those are going to be your go-to, you know, reliable air attacking units mostly. But keep in mind, of course, the Ram Rider can attack air as well, so you can use her to lock down air units or just for a little bit of extra DPS against air units. The guards now, definitely a replaceable card. You could replace them with like the Skeleton Army or the Goblin Gang or something like that. But they're a really great card, and I feel like people kind of don't appreciate them. That shield effect can be really good. You know, they can live through a fireball or even a rocket. You know, they won't die to zap like a Skeleton Army or like part of a Goblin Gang will do. Excuse the chewing noise here, by the way. Bonnie's chewing on her bone over there. Why don't I go ahead and take that away from her so that it doesn't take away from her video here. Alright guys, I just took it and gave it back to her outside in the other room. I didn't completely take it away from her, so don't worry. The doggy's okay. Alright, where was I? Talking about the guards. They have that role that they fulfill, where they're kind of your swarmy unit and they're also kind of your ground counter. You know, they'll absorb hits from things like this prince here, for example. They do a great job of that. They're great against graveyards because they're long range and there's 3 of them and relatively fast attack speed and so on and so forth. They're just kind of a great card overall, honestly, and I feel like they're a little bit underrated and people should be using them a little bit more. But, you know, it is what it is. If you look at it, the Goblin Gang is just better in certain respects. You know, like it can attack air, there's more of them, it's just more beneficial in different ways, so it's kind of a more common replacement. But since this deck has a decent amount of air counters and you want something, you know, a little bit more tanky, a little bit more reliable to defend against ground units, then that's why we have the guards in there. Now for the spells, definitely replaceable. Snowball is just one of those cards that's prevalent right now. If you prefer the Barbarian Barrel, it's great. It's a really strong card, and it's super strong in the current meta. It's probably, if not the most popular light spell right now. If you are like me and you like Zap, you just like the instantaneous damage and the stun effect, go ahead and run Zap. If you like Log, go ahead and run Log. It's your choice. But Snowball is pretty fun to play around with. It's just one of those cards that's kind of hasn't seen its full potential yet. People are just starting to use it more and more now that it's more viable. It was just kind of underpowered before. It's much more viable, much more decent at this point. So definitely consider using that Snowball in there. But if you don't like it and you're more comfortable with the Zap or whatever, then just stick that Zap in there. For the Poison, it lays out that area, that path of clears out a path, excuse me, for your Ram Rider, for your Bandit, you know, any sort of like Skeleton Army or Goblin Gang or anything that they'll use, the Poison will instantly take it out. It will fully take out like a Wizard or a Musketeer, whereas a Fireball will leave it with a sliver of health, so it can be beneficial there. If you prefer the instant damage, go ahead and go Fireball. If you prefer heavy spells, go ahead and go Lightning. Go ahead and go Rocket. Whatever you prefer, guys, it's really up to you when it comes to spells in some decks. In certain ones, you really want to have certain spells for various reasons, but I feel like in this deck, it's a little bit more replaceable. So that is pretty much it for the card list. If you're going to do card replacements, for the Bandit, of course, you can always just do something that charges like a Prince. You could get another mini tank. If you want to go Royal Ghost, you could. Something that costs 3 elixir like Knight would be good, or an Ice Golem. But having that Bandit charge effect is really good. I would go with something that can do some serious damage and do a charge effect, you know, like the Prince. For the Inferno Dragon, you could always go for the Inferno Tower, or maybe just a Mega Minion, you know, another heavy hitting, high DPS air unit. For Ram Rider, just go for another win condition. You could always go for the Battle Ram, or maybe you prefer the Hog Rider. I'm a little bit over Hog just because I played it so much for so long. But if you were a Hog player like me, or used to be, or how I used to be rather, or you really like the Hog Rider, then go ahead and put it in there. If not, then I would recommend the Battle Ram if you don't have the Ram Rider. Plays a very similar role. Doesn't have that defensive potential, but it can kite units, so like I could use it in the opposite lane here to kite that giant skeleton into the other lane. So you could definitely put the Ram Rider in there. For the Megaknight, that's a hard replacement. You could just go a tanky unit like a Knight. You could get that into the arena effect with like the E-Wiz, or you could go something really heavy like a P.E.K.K.A. Honestly, a P.E.K.K.A. would not be a bad replacement in this deck. It would give you some, give you a really heavy tanky unit, some more of a control element. You would just be lacking splash damage then. It's a lot of single target units. You know, you got the Bandit, you got the Inferno Dragon, you got the Ram Rider. So it would make you lack in that department, but it would give you that kind of tanky, heavy unit role, fulfill that role and work out really well. Same elixir cost as well, of course. For the minions, of course, you can always go for like, I don't know, a Mega Minion or Archers or Spear Goblins, some cheap support card like that. For the guards, I talked about it already, but really quickly, you could go for like a Goblin Gang or a Skeleton Army, some sort of swarmy card like that. And I went into the spells already, so I won't go too much in depth into them, but you know, spells are a little bit more flexible. You could put in another light spell or a medium spell on the place of that giant Snowball or of that Poison. Now for this last replay here, guys, I want to do a bit more of a play-by-play. I just did this match not too long ago, and honestly, I was sitting there thinking, man, there was a lot of mistakes I made. and I just want to point them out and talk about how I could have done things differently. So for example here, Bandit, not necessarily the best thing to counter those fire spirits, because she charges into the first one, and then the second one just jumps on her, and then the prince finishes her off. You'll notice rather that this guy is running a graveyard freeze deck, so like a freeze yard kind of deck, and I'm not really expecting it. I use the minions there to counter his graveyard. He doesn't have any elixir left for the freeze, so it's kind of useless, and I kind of underestimate him at first. I'm thinking like, okay, he's using his graveyard willy-nilly, he's not really getting any value out of it. I don't know that he has freeze yet, but he hasn't been using any freeze or poison or anything on top of it, so I'm kind of like, okay, I got this in the bag. I don't need to pay too much attention, I don't need to play too hard. But wait for that first freeze, guys. I'm telling you, that first freeze, he gets some serious value out of it and really gives me a run for my money for the rest of the match. Maybe he pulled it together, maybe that was part of his strategy, making me think he wasn't so great, or maybe I just wasn't playing that well this game. See, and make that, excuse me, I can't talk today. See, I make that same mistake, that's what I was trying to say, with that Bandit again. Does the same thing, you know, just gets blown up by the fire spirits and the prince. I decided to use the poison there to get a little bit of value, and as I go on with the match, I'm thinking, okay, I actually want to probably save the poison for his graveyard, but I haven't seen the freeze yet, so I'm not too worried about it. Here we go with the graveyard, and I'm wondering, okay, why is he setting it alone? I don't need to worry about it too much, but there's the freeze, and then I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So I wait for all the skeletons to spawn, and then I just snowball them all. They all die, but at that point, since the freeze only lasts 4 seconds now, it was actually pretty much done. So it was a little bit unnecessary to use that snowball, but it cleared it out before they did any more damage. I mean, look at that. That was over half of my tower's health. It's down at 1093 now. I mean, that's significantly low compared to what it was at before, just from that one freeze graveyard. And this is one of those rare instances where I'm going to be using the Megaknight in the back, just because I have that extra elixir. I want to build up a big monster push here and go in for, you know, a deadly kind of snowball beatdown style push. I see poison value there. I clip the tower from the Princess Tower to the Furnace to the Dark Goblin to the Baby Dragon all at once with one poison, so I get some serious value there. That's why I'm not afraid to use it there. But then I'm thinking, oh boy, I should have used the poison there instead. And I actually meant to use the minions. I was wondering, why is my Megaknight down there? I didn't mean to use him. And looking back, it looked like I even had Megaknight selected, or excuse me, minions selected, but Megaknight came down. Anyway, I'm sure it was either a minor bug or it was just something that I was looking at incorrectly and I did incorrectly. Worried that I'm not going to connect here, but the Bandit does work there. Look at that Bandit just dashing and dashing and dashing and dashing back and forth and up and down and all over the place from the bridge over to the building, I think it was, over to the Princess Tower, back down to the Dark Goblin, all kinds of stuff. Dark Goblin got knocked away by the giant snowball, and Bandit just dashes back over to her. Then we've got the minions going on offense there. I let him get way too much damage here onto my Princess Tower, which is unfortunate, but I use the poison there because I know that he has the freeze coming down. Another mistake, I put the poison too far down, and so the skeletons on the top there are getting a little bit of damage. I freak out here because I'm thinking, okay, he's going to kill me with the Dark Goblin, but the Dark Goblin gets finished off just in time. He doesn't have anything to do enough damage to my tower, or at least not in hand. I don't think he even has it in this deck. All he's got is the freeze and the tornado, right? So he doesn't have any fireball or anything to finish off my tower, so I'm like, okay, all in, get super aggressive here, put everything you have at the bridge, because if he is allowed to connect to my tower at all anymore, he'll kill it. He literally could have just used the Dark Goblin there in the pocket, and he would have killed my tower. But instead he uses it on defense. I think he's kind of panicking a little bit and trying to make sure that I don't take out his tower. But the poison with the Battle Ram, or excuse me, the Ram Rider, and the minions, and that last minion there gets that swing off and just barely pulls that victory away from me. Oh man, my blood was pumping at that point. That was a pretty intense match at the end there. I didn't play too well, and I paid for it, but I managed to pull it together at the very end. This is a really fun deck to play, guys. I'm glad that Megaknight has found its way back into the meta. Make sure to leave the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment in the comment section below. If you're new to the channel and you've made it this far, seriously consider subscribing. I cover decks like this all the time, a couple times a week. All kinds of fun decks, balance changes, all kinds of awesome stuff like that. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, guys, and have a good night.
Chili, 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 chili. Count chili. Count chili. Tell my mama